Tension has escalated between Russia and Ukraine after Russia seized 3 Ukrainian naval vessels of the Crimean Peninsula. Russia also fired at these vessels, injuring a number of Ukrainian crew members. Now, the Ukraine and Crimea have blamed each other for the incident. Video released on Russian TV shows the face-off at the high sea. 6 Ukrainian seamen were injured when the Russian Coast Guard opened fire at the Ukrainian ships before seizing them. Ukraine says that its vessels were headed to the Sea of Azov under international maritime laws when they came under attack. Russia insists the Ukrainian ships entered its waters illegally. Russia had earlier prevented the vessels from entering the Sea of Azov by placing a tanker under a bridge in the Kerch Strait, which is the only access to the Sea of Azov. The Kerch Strait near Crimea has since been reopened. Remember, both Russia and Ukraine have the right to use the Sea of Azov. The Ukraine condemned the Russia's action.
Набули підтвердження стосовно дій Російської Федерації щодо вільного судоходства через Керченську протоку і Азовське море. Їх немає. Це показано всьому світу і ще наглядно показано жорстокі агресивні дії з боку Російської Федерації.
The Ukrainian parliament is all set to approve President Poroshenko's proposal to impose martial law. The law would restrict civil liberties and give state institutions greater power. The Ukrainian army has meanwhile been put on full combat alert. A statement from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry read, and I quote, based on the NSDC decision to impose martial law, the head of the General Staff, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Ukraine has ordered to put all units of the Armed Forces of the Ukraine on full combat mode, unquote. The international response has been in support of the Ukraine. The European Union called on Russia to restore freedom of passage at the Kerch Strait. The EU also urged everyone to act with utmost restraint. NATO said that it fully supports the Ukraine's sovereignty and its territorial integrity, including its navigational rights in its territorial waters. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has called in an emergency meeting in the light of the development. Russia has accused Ukraine of fanning anti-Russia sentiment and staging provocation to help Western countries tighten sanctions on Moscow. The face-off near the Kerch Strait is the latest in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The Kerch Strait is a crucial stretch of water. It is the entry point for Ukraine into the Azov Sea. The Sea of Azov is located in the east of Crimea. It is to the south of some Ukraine's regions that have now been seized by pro-Russian separatists. According to a treaty signed in 2003, both Ukraine and Russia have free navigation in the Sea of Azov. This means vessels of both Ukraine and Russia are allowed in the waters of the sea. Ukraine has 2 ports on its northern shore. These ports are key to Ukraine in terms of its steel and grain exports. These ports are also crucial for importing coal. Now, Russia has begun inspecting all the vessels that go to these Ukrainian ports or are coming from them. The inspection began in March this year after Ukraine detained a fishing vessel from Crimea. And I'm John Malusi, WION's correspondent from Moscow. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us. The escalation of tension, what is the context in which this face-off took place?
Well, of course, the context in the last few years is that these are tensions which have been going on for years. In 2014, Russia annexed the Crimea region, which is the region of land just next to this water that we're talking about. And, of course, Russia is backing separatists in eastern Ukraine, and there's been a big conflict there as well. So the tensions between these two countries have been rising for years now. But in terms of what's happening in these waters, it all kicked off just over 24 hours ago, really, at the point where Russia used a cargo ship to block the strait, stopping these Ukrainian vessels from travelling into the Sea of Azov, which is where there are some key Ukrainian ports that they needed to get to. Russia says that it did that because Ukraine had failed to inform them of the journey of these ships, as they normally do. Although both countries have rights to this water, they do normally apparently inform each other of these of their journeys, and Russia says that Ukraine failed to do so. Ukraine denies that completely, but Russia has used very strong language about this, called it a planned provocation, said that these boats illegally entered Russian waters and were manoeuvring dangerously and ignoring warnings to stop. That's the Russian side of the story. On the Ukrainian side, though, they say that Russia was opening fire, was wounding servicemen, was seizing these ships for no reason at all. So it's certainly a dangerous new step opening up in this crisis between these two countries, unprecedented from what we've seen before. And understandably, it's making world leaders, particularly those in Europe, this is on the doorstep of Europe, very worried indeed.
Do you expect the escalation to increase, keeping in mind that previously when the both nations collided, it led to a longer standoff where casualties took place?
Well, it's probably too soon to say whether this is going to develop in the way that the conflict between these two countries has before. Certainly overnight, as this was happening, people were very concerned. Immediately, NATO and the European Union let it be known that they were monitoring the situation, called for restraint and de-escalation. Some other nations have put this squarely on Russia, Canada, Poland, Denmark, condemning Russia's aggression and asking Russia to de-escalate this situation. One way that Russia could do that is to release these 3 ships, which it hasn't done so far, although it has reopened the waters so that other ships will be able to get through and use this route, which, as I say, is normally a route that both countries have access to. So there are ways perhaps for the situation to de-escalate, but also there are ways that this could escalate, and it's a little bit too soon perhaps to say which way this incident is going to go.
And last question before I let go of you. In context of this present escalation between Ukraine and Russia, Russia insists that the violation has taken place on part of Ukraine. It insists the territorial sovereignty was violated. How do you see that in context of claims and counterclaims? More like weaponization of information?
It can be difficult for any of us to know exactly what happened here. There has been release of recordings of the distress call of the Ukrainian ship, showing that appearing to show that the Ukrainian ship was not violating Russian sovereignty, was not too close to Russian land there. But that's just one side of the story. Russia is absolutely adamant that it was. It in fact called it a planned provocation. It says that Ukrainian authorities orchestrated this on purpose so that they could bring in martial law for political reasons within Ukraine. On the other hand, Ukraine says that Russia is, dangerously escalating a crisis needlessly. So on both sides, people trying to spread disinformation about what happened, and it is difficult to know without being there, without seeing it, exactly what is happening. These are two nations which both have reasons for escalating these tensions. But so far, Ukraine has Western powers on side, the European Union, NATO, and other nation states. But Russia, of course, very powerful in this region as well. It has control of both sides, the land on both sides of this water now. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how this situation is going to escalate.
Thank you very much for joining us on this issue. Now, moving on in the bulletin, the U.S. State Department has declared a reward of up to $5 million for the information leading to the arrest or conviction of any individual who committed, conspired to commit, or aided the execution of the 2008 Mumbai attack. In a statement issued on its website, U.S. State Department spokesperson said that the United States is committed to working with international partners. They want to identify and bring to justice those responsible for the 2008 Mumbai attack. This is the third U.S. reward offer seeking information on the perpetrators of the Mumbai attack in April 2012. The State Department announced a reward for the information that brings to justice LET founder Hafiz Saeed and his second-in-command Hafiz Abdul Rahman Makki. The U.S. has asked Pakistan to ensure justice to 26/11 attack victims and their families. In a statement, U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo said, and I quote, "It is an affront to to the families of the victim that after 10 years, those who planned the Mumbai attack have still not been convicted for their involvement. We call upon all countries, particularly Pakistan, to uphold the UN Security Council obligations to implement sanctions against the terrorists responsible for this atrocity, including Lashkar-e-Taiba and its affiliates. India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj responded to the statement from the United States. Spokesperson of the ministry took to Twitter and put out Sushma Swaraj's statement. It read, and I quote, "I welcome the statement made by US Secretary of State on the 10th anniversary of the Mumbai attacks, calling upon Pakistan to bring to justice perpetrators of the attack. I urge Pakistan to heed the call of international community and fulfill its international obligations by implementing sanctions against those responsible for this horrific act of terror." Now, it's been a decade since 26/11. The events took place 10 years ago, scarred thousands of lives forever, and changed India's relations with neighbors, Pakistan. The attack on Mumbai that killed almost 200 people made it clear that India's hostilities with Pakistan is not just confined to Kashmir. On the 26th of November in 2008, 10 Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists carried out a series of attacks in India's maximum city. Mumbai was brought to standstill. 8 locations were attacked, including a popular railway terminus and 2-star hotels. A lot has changed since then. India clearly is better prepared. Mumbai has not forgotten the bloody night. What's unfortunate is the fact that despite 10 years having lapsed since the night of horror, a lot has remained unchanged. Pakistan continues to be a safe haven for terrorists. The mastermind of the 26/11 attacks, Hafiz Saeed, continues to roam freely in Pakistan. Mumbai's Taj Mahal Hotel witnessed the 26/11 horror firsthand on the ill-fated night. 4 terrorists entered the hotel. They first attacked the guests around the swimming pool and then moved to the bars, the restaurants and the guest rooms. The 3-day siege ended on the 29th November. By then, 31 people had lost their lives inside the hotel. Listen in to the stories of some of the hotel staff.
They started shooting blindly. Some of my friends had got injured that time. I managed to hide in my kitchen, that's the chambers. But maybe I was not hidden so well because I was found out by the terrorists. They got me out. Me along with 2 more guests, we were made to stand in a line and we were shot point blank. Unfortunately, the 2 guests didn't make it. But I was lucky that I was not grievously hurt, managed to save myself.
For the first few hours, I was absolutely shaken, as was everybody. I was terrified, and you could hear grenades being thrown. They were being hauled from across. The chandeliers were moving. They were shaking. There was dust falling. So it sort of gets to you. But I think after a few hours, something settled, and I was able to calm myself down, and then I had this very strong feeling that everything is going to be okay.
The very fact we were able to open the hotel within 3 weeks, the very fact that the terrorists were not able to knock us down, the very fact that it has created a bond with all the families. So I think that symbolizes that power of one. It's important for that reason. Second is to demonstrate to the world that this should not happen again.
Several children lost their parents during the horrific attack that lasted for 3 days. Today we will bring you a special show featuring some of these stories. The 26/11 Children airs at 8:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. Indian Standard Time and is anchored by actor Rahul Bose. Do tune in. Former President of Maldives, Mohammad Nasheed, is now a free man, acquitted of all charges against him and back in his home country. In a big reprieve to the Maldivian politician, the country's top court acquitted him of alleged terrorism charges. His 13-year prison conviction has also quashed. Nasheed was held guilty of terrorism in 2015 over the alleged abduction of a judge during his presidency. Maldives Supreme Court ruled that Nasheed was wrongfully charged. It criticized the lower court for accepting the case and proceeding with it. The ruling noted that Nasheed was convicted despite the state failing to provide sufficient evidence. While giving a clean chit to Nasheed, the court noted that prior to the judge's arrest, there had been police reports of him obstructing their work, using his influence within the government. The court came down heavily on the military and said that they failed to complete the procedures in arresting the criminal court judge. It held that the judge in the question was not kidnapped. The top court will now review hearings over the sentences of former Defence Minister Mohammad Nazim and former Deputy Speaker Ahmad Nazim tomorrow. Nasheed returned to Maldives from self-imposed exile in November. This after top court suspended his sentence following a request to review his conviction. Nasheed had been, until recently, living in the United Kingdom. He was granted political asylum in the United Kingdom after travelling there for medical treatment in January 2016. The ruling paves the way for Mohammad Nasheed to re-enter active politics. The terror conviction had led to Nasheed being barred from contesting in 2018 presidential elections. His close confidant, Ibrahim Soleh, was named as an alternate contestant of his party. Soleh is now the president of Maldives. If you live in the Indian capital of the New Delhi, you are familiar with the smog and pollution and the health issues that follow. Yes, we are talking about Indian capital. The toxic smog is a reality in China's capital, Beijing too, and the city is on yellow alert with a weather forecast of heavy smog in the next 3 days. On your screen now are the latest visuals of the Beijing, a city covered in toxic haze. It seems that the Beijing is not able to overcome its years-old problem of air pollution. In spite of spending more than $1 billion on a cleanup, the authorities have asked citizens to take precautionary measures against the deadly haze. Air quality in China's capital reaches hazardous levels every year as winter approaches. Beijing has begun witnessing more clear and sunny weather due to the host of measures. But officials say that the recurrence of smoggy days showed that the city is yet to completely overcome the problem. The city has initiated 338 projects to switch from coal-fired heating to that of natural gas, which cost about $1.3 billion US. And let's have a quick look at the weather stories from across the globe. Heavy snowfall and strong winds disrupted flights in an airport in China's Xinjiang region. Timing of over 20 flights were changed. The airport staff had to clear the snow on runway to deal with the flight's delay. The weather also affected train and bus services. Meanwhile, the local meteorological department has issued a yellow alert for a cold wave. A winter storm blanketed much of the central Midwest of the United States. With snow at the end of the Thanksgiving weekend, many holiday travelers in the United States were stuck at airports. More than 600 flights were cancelled due to an incoming blizzard bearing down on the Midwest. Blizzard warnings were issued in areas stretching across Northeast, Kansas to Chicago, with snow already falling in some regions. The Northern California wildfire that destroyed the mountain town of Paradise and killed at least 85 people has been fully contained. The campfire that started on November 8 destroyed nearly 14,000 homes and burned nearly 154,000 acres of land. However, investigators have yet to determine the cause of the fire. A sandstorm hit northwest China's Gansu province with sandwall as high as almost 100 meters. Accompanied by strong wind, the sand wall moved forward very fast and engulfed the county town within 5 minutes, reducing the visibility to less than 10 meters. NASA's first robotic lander, designed to study the deep interior of a distant world, hurled closer to the Mars on course for a planned touchdown today after a 6-month voyage. Traveling 301 million miles from Earth, the Mars Insight spacecraft was due to reach its destination on the rock-strewn surface of the red planet at about 8 GMT. The mission control team at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab is prepared to conduct a final adjustment to the InSight's flight path made to maneuver the spacecraft closer towards its entry point over Mars. If all goes as planned, InSight will streak into the pink Martian sky nearly 24 hours later at 12,000 miles per hour. Its 77-mile descent to the surface will be slowed by atmospheric friction, a giant parachute, and retro rockets. When it lands at 6.5 minutes later, it will be traveling a mere 5 miles per hour.
I am completely excited and completely nervous all at the same time because everything that we've done to date makes us feel comfortable and confident we're going to land on Mars, but everything has to go perfectly, and Mars could always throw us a curveball, to use the baseball analogy, that may decrease our batting average. But I think we've been practicing very well. I'm confident, but very trepidatious. I have not been sleeping that great. Might be because I have 2 and 4-year-old kids running around the house all the time, but nonetheless, I'm going to be very excited once we get that first signal back that shows that we've successfully landed on Mars.
More than 7 months after its launch from the Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, the US probe InSight is set to land on Mars. NASA's mission, a study of Mars' inner structure to help understand better how rocky planets in the solar system are formed. To do this, InSight will use an instrument called SEIS, a seismometer that will measure Martian tectonic activity. SEIS, designed in France, is extremely sensitive. It's protected by a wind and thermal shield. Scientists are hoping to record around 100 Mars earthquakes. The lander is also equipped with a heat sensor, HP Cube, which will measure heat flowing out of the planet's interior. The probe will penetrate almost 5 meters into Mars' surface. The mission is expected to last 2 years.